Right. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. So today's talk, we're going to talk about demystifying the thyroid, and the we're going to learn how to connect the dots between everyday thyroid-related concerns and how to bring it back into balance. This is a very unique talk because we're going to cover things that are not almost never covered in any other thyroid talks, including the 5 dyads, the 5 other systems that are connected to the thyroid that most people, some people talk about some of them, but some people talk about all of them, because a lot of times people have things that they think are thyroid, but actually is a downstream effect of this other thing that is affecting the thyroid. So first of all, I want to congratulate all of you for joining us on the webinar. The fact that you're here is that you're really curious to find out what's going on about you and your thyroid health, and that you're probably doing all the right things. You've been focused on your health for years, but you've been experiencing some things or are concerned about things like premature hair loss, weight gain, excess heat and cold intolerance, trouble sleeping, kind of all the things that can come with thyroid issues, whether too much or too little. And a thyroid at some point becomes a concern for a lot of people, especially females, and that's because there's a connection of estrogen affecting thyroid much more than testosterone, but we'll cover that a bit later. Now, this webinar is not for you if you're feeling super frustrated and that you feel like you've given up. I mean, we may help turn that around with kind of the optimism of that the things you're dealing with thyroid may not actually be thyroid, but be things that are affecting the thyroid. So we can hopefully turn that around. If you're not interested about learning about functional medicine and lab testing, this webinar is not for you. And the reason why that's relevant is that you can't help someone's thyroid without testing. It's really just not possible or even practical. I mean, I should take that back. It's not possible. Of course, people can get lucky and maybe change a couple things here and there based on some books they read or podcasts they listened to. But really, thyroid is really about numbers and labs and fine tuning. And that's really where modern holistic medicine is going, is functional testing. The other reasons webinar is not for you is if you don't believe there can be a resolution. And I can say from lots of clinical experience that there's absolutely a possibility for resolution based on the success stories I've gotten in my practice. Now, today, I'm going to share with you about how you can connect the dots with your thyroid and bring everything back to balance. So those 5 key organ systems, we're going to talk about how they relate to the thyroid. And then the last thing that we'll do is we'll give away a prize, because we really want to honor and encourage people to really go through this educational journey of understanding the thyroid. We want to reward people as such. So a winner will be given a very valuable prize at the end for those that comment live during the webinar. Now, who am I? I'm Dr. Shay. I've been involved in natural medicine for, it's actually 25 years. When I first started, when I read my first book and took my first seminar on natural health, and I've gone a very long, circuitous journey through multiple health disciplines, dealing with my own chronic health issues like insomnia, gut problems, severely inflammatory diet, anxiety, depression, chronic pain, and overcoming 2 addictions. So I've been there when it's come to dealing with something that's chronic and difficult, and pulled myself out of it and learned a thing or two to help others come out of their own health challenges, but also to help them become more optimal and kind of aspirational in their health goals. So my mission is I primarily help busy, health conscious entrepreneurs attain and sustain high performance to create freedoms for themselves and others. I have a particular affinity for mompreneurs. I was raised by a stressed out, busy mompreneur. And but I also help other people aside from entrepreneurs, but I do I focus a lot on helping entrepreneurs, partly because they are also bringing future solutions into the world. And but again, I help more than just entrepreneurs, but these are people that I mostly gravitate to. Now, here's my education. It's super duper nerdy. Institute for Functional Medicine, Kalish Institute for Functional Medicine, genetic certifications, acupuncture, functional neurology, chiropractic, 3 bachelor's degrees. Like, it's super. I'm Crystal is the one who found that emoji, my business manager, and insisted, to which I capitulated and said, yeah, okay, fine. It's kind of on brand. Let's put that up there. So if you want to know more about my background and all the rest of it, you can go to my website, drsamshay.com. Additional information is there under my About section, including a list of podcasts and webinars and other summits I've been on, including much more deep dive into my history and other things. And I just wanted to share one very relevant case study with you. Working with Sam has been as close to one-stop shop as I could find in this confusing journey to discovering total health. Super smart, connected all the dots. And then I'm going to just go down the second one. After just a few months, I was able to lower my thyroid medication, key phrase, under the supervision of my prescribing MD. Okay, I just want to be very clear. Like, I do not raise or lower people's medications. I help people get healthier so that the medication becomes less necessary under the supervision and careful titration of the prescribing MD, because it's not within my scope to raise or lower medication. And the great thing about thyroid is that you follow numbers. And so with numbers, you can meaningfully demonstrate that you need fewer doses or less concentration of your medication, but always under the supervision of prescribing MD. Additionally, with Eileen, I introduced you to some other things about her lifestyle, including some processes that help her deal with a lot of the stress and relationship stress in her life. And this one, particularly, I fell in love with my husband for the first time in 16 years of being with him. And healing is much more than just a thyroid gland. It's on multiple levels. And we are, due to time constraints, focusing just on the thyroid for this call, but I want to assure everyone that the approach to thyroid, just like the approach to anything, adrenals, gut, mitochondria, brain, liver, whatever it is a multifactorial approach of which mind and body are deeply connected. So the reason why I'm passionate about this whole work is that I was raised by an unhealthy, extremely tired mompreneur who was in a lot of chronic pain. My father did give child support, and it was not good for anybody involved. It was really bad. I had lots of terrible things going on with my health, not just the physical, but the culturally, the local culture of the school. There was a lot of violence, both physical and emotional. And I had learned how to cope as a child through sugar and video games. And I went on my journey because of all of the things that happened to me between age 6 and 18. I'm now standing before you today. So my complex health issues drove me to find the answers that I needed. And I became inspired to help others shortcut their suffering by sharing with them all the tools and information I came across. So the real foundation came from reading this book, Dr. Jensen's Guide to Better Bowel Care. I still have the original copy, all dog-eared and sticky noted, and all the, my notes in it and all the rest of it, 25 years later. And I'm not, it's a great book to read. I'm not saying you have to go out and read this book tomorrow. I'm just kind of giving you a background of how I got started. And it's related to thyroid because gut is one of the 5 dyads related to thyroid. It's one of the 5. There's 4 others, but gut is super important. And if you are experiencing things that you're struggling with, thyroid related issues or otherwise, what I'm here to share with you is, because I've gone through all kind of the heavy lifting, we're going to really shortcut this whole thing for you. And some other, aside from my health history, I've got some other interesting stuff in the background. I'm also a stand-up comic. I have about 10 or so videos on my YouTube channel of of my best bits. This is me pretending to be David Attenborough narrating a National Geographic special inside a Boulder coffee shop. If you're a David Attenborough fan, you will love that clip. I lived in New Zealand for 8 years, had a clinic there, published 4 ebooks, 3 online courses, and I have a wonderful dog named Lily, who is I've had since March of this year. And if you're on my newsletter, you'll notice occasionally I have what's called Lily's Corner, where I give a very critical update of Lily's experience in the world. The most recent one was how Lily has been on vigilant squirrel duty, keeping the squirrels at bay in the park, protecting everyone. We all feel a little bit safer in the park with Lily there, protecting us from the squirrels. And there's a wonderful photo of her being hyper vigilant and she and a squirrel having a stare down. Squirrel obviously on the tree, well out of reach, but Lily ever vigilant, staring. So now I'm going to talk about Lily. I get a bit distracted. Of course, any dog lover will understand. So coming back, reeling back in, we're going to talk about the thyroid. Thyroid, very important. Now, if you're here, you might be thinking you've tried everything, no matter how much you eat, how well you eat, you exercise, nothing in your body changes. You're so tired and you don't want to dedicate even more, or you're overwhelmed. And I just know how to get there. Like I've been through all of these things, all of the things. So I get it. And I want to just acknowledge that some of you may be feeling frustrated and hopeless around this whole thing around the thyroid. And I can just tell you from my personal journey and from clinically working with others that for this to work, there's 3 things that have to be true. 1, you have to have room, be open to a positive outcome. 2, you must be coachable and willing to take action, especially action you may not have considered before. And number 3, you have to be willing to focus on progress, like what's working, because it's very easy to focus on what's not working. So what does it mean is that you can do it, that even though you've tried different plans, diets, lifestyle changes, etc., that you can do this. Now, one thing I'd want you to envision is what would life be like if you got to the bottom of the health conundrums? What would it mean for you? How would your life be different? How would you live differently? How would you relate to other people differently? So what if the health issues you're dealing with weren't exactly your fault, that your body is telling you something and it's not working, the body's not working against you, it's working for you? I remember I had deep crippling insomnia for over 12 years. And I'd literally wake up at 3 a.m. on the dot, hating my body, like just waking up angry that I was up at 3 a.m. and my body wouldn't let me sleep. And I was just in this very combative, hostile relationship with my body. And I didn't know at the time that my body was trying to help me, let me know that some things were wrong and that it was trying to tell me something as opposed to sabotage me. So we're going to talk about the thyroid. And from that perspective, that what you may be going through is the body not trying to sabotage you, but trying to help you. So about the thyroid. So the thyroid is a little butterfly-shaped gland, sits directly behind the Adam's apple, and it regulates quite a lot. It's the body's it helps regulate body temperature, sleep, hunger, reproduction, metabolism. It's the thyroid, the thyroid is about long-term health, growth, healing, repair, whereas the adrenals is more about short-term survival. So that's one of the 5 dyads, adrenal, thyroid. The adrenals are focused on short-term survival. The thyroid is about long-term health, healing, growth, repair, reproduction. Now, 20 million Americans suffer with thyroid problems. 50 to 60 go their entire lives without knowing it, or rather being undiagnosed. So how do they happen? There's nutritional issues, genetic predispositions, environmental toxins, stressors or other ones. Physical damage to the thyroid can do it. there's a bunch of different factors that go into it, sleep deprivation. It's basically, it's a very complex gland. The thyroid is really a downstream thing. It's taking in all the information and is responding to the collective chemical soup, hormone soup that's going on in the body. And people can have too much or too little. Now, if you have too little thyroid, this is hypo, or little lesser than ideal thyroid. People can have experience of any of these dozen or so, or a combination of these dozen or so symptoms: being tired, depressed or anxious, moody, lack motivation, always cold or feeling very affected by the cold, or at least just cold hands and feet, constipation, bloated, achiness, brain fog, unexplained weight gain, dry hair, skin issues, also joint pain. Unexplained joint pain, just kind of global joint pain, can be in there as well. And then there's the reverse, hyperthyroid. Is too much thyroid. There's trouble sleeping, insomnia, nervousness, racing heartbeat, unexplained weight loss, excessive sweating, muscle weakness, lots of bowel movements, and thin, brittle hair. So let me just talk about the hair piece in a little bit more detail, because hair is really interesting. So if you have hyperthyroid, that means your metabolism is going too fast, which means that your hair is growing faster than it should. So this is where it's thin and brittle, versus if it's hypo, that means you can have hair loss. In fact, hair loss should be on here. In fact, that one of the famous signs of hypothyroidism is the outer third of the eyebrows, the lateral third, the third that's the eyebrow that's closest to the ear, not the one that's closest to the nose. That one begins to disappear, because if your hair is so slow to growth with hypo, if your hair is slow to grow, your eyebrows are the slow, or if your outer third of your eyebrows is like the slowest hair growth area on your face, I think. So if it's extra slow, or it's slowed down because of hypothyroidism, then it's basically just not going to grow. In fact, they may even just kind of like fall out. And then people, even with hypothyroidism, can lose hair because there's just not enough growth to keep the hair anchored. So that's hypo versus hyper. Now, there's different, so hypo and hyper are about too much. People think it's about too much thyroid hormone or too little thyroid hormone. It's a touch more complicated than that. It's not just about if you have too much or too little, is that, is it being overused or underused? Because you can produce plenty of thyroid hormone, but if its conversion from T4 to T3 is being blocked, then you have effective or functional hypothyroidism. If you don't have the if you have a lot of excess estrogen in your system, it can gum up the process for the thyroid. Even though you're producing, it's gumming everything up. So it could appear to be hypothyroid. If your mitochondria, or the electricity factories of the cell, are damaged, and the thyroid hormone goes in and tries to turn it on, but to turn up the metabolism, but the electricity plant is broken, you can have plenty of thyroid hormone, but you're not able to turn on the metabolism. So it's more than just the volume of thyroid. That's what determines if it's hypo or hyper. It's how it's being used. So how do you spot now there's another aspect of thyroid, which is the autoimmunity to the thyroid. So Hashimoto's is when your immune system attacks the thyroid as a foreign invader. So Graves' disease is when there's too much, it's an overproduction of thyroid, and both of them are considered autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's and Graves'. One is where you're making less, one is where you'll be making more. And we're going to talk about the connection to this. We're going to talk about is the gut. So that's going to come up a bit later. But there are people that they have autoimmune to the thyroid, and we'll be addressing that as well. And it gets a bit more complicated, but is totally, it's something that we're going to be, it's something that's worth understanding about, because people's gut, like I talked about at the beginning, that Dr. Jensen's got a better bowel care. That is the connection between thyroid and autoimmunity. So there's two main hormones, T3 and T4. Now, there's another one called TSH. TSH comes from the pituitary, which then goes to the thyroid to make T4, and then T4 is then converted into T3. Now, T4 travels around and then gets to the cells and then is converted into T3 in what's called the mitochondria. Mitochondria is that electricity factory. That electricity factory, what that does is that is that's the thing that provides all the electricity to the cell. So think of the cell as the city and the power plant as mitochondria. So you need a power plant to run the electricity of the city. And if power plant goes out, you have about 3 days until the city turns into Mad Max. And you need electricity. If you live in a house with electricity, you can get by with candles and batteries for a little bit, but then things really start to break down and the function of the house starts to devolve. So you need to turn your power plant on, and it's T3 that dials it up. So people have heard of this thing like your basal metabolic rate, that your thyroid controls your basal metabolic rate, but no one has ever explained what that is. What that is the rate at which your mitochondria, your power plants, burn fuel for energy. The basal metabolic rate, meaning the baseline metabolic rate, how well you burn protein, carbs, and fats for electricity, for ATP. That is what basal metabolic rate. How is the thyroid related to that? Because it's the thyroid that goes to the power plant to turn it on, to then signal to shovel in the fuel, proteins, fats, carbs, to be burned for electricity. That is the basal metabolic rate. It's the thyroid mitochondria connection. The other business end of the thyroid is the mitochondria. The business end of the thyroid is the mitochondria. The T3 is the engineer that dials up the activity of the power plant of the mitochondria. That's the connection. That's what basal metabolic rate is. Now, if you didn't know that, don't feel bad. I didn't learn that till about 2.5 years ago. I've heard basal metabolic rate for over 20 years, and no one defined it for me until 2.5 years ago. With this very simple understanding, well, simple now in retrospect. So that's how you can have lots of T3 and T4, but still have signs of hypothyroidism if your power plant's broken. You can send in the engineer and they can flick the switches and dial the dials as much as they want, but if the factory's broken, it's not going to work. So that is one of the main reasons why people can have seemingly normal or even excessive thyroid hormone, but still be tired all the time because they have plenty of engineers, but the factory's broken. So over here on the left, this is the mitochondria. Mitochondria is one of the most fascinating things in all of biology. It is truly, I mean, just look at it. I mean, it looks cool. It's actually a little bacteria that symbiosed itself, that lodged itself inside our mammalian cells as a mutual symbiotic relationship. It's actually got its own DNA. It's RNA rather. Wait, hold on. It's got its own circular. It's got its DNA is not in a double helix. It's in a circle. Like it's a different thing. So it's super cool. Anyway, I can nerd out on the mitochondria forever. If you really want to nerd out on mitochondria, you can go to my YouTube channel, and there is a video I did that's about 50 minutes long where I recorded how to interpret the ion panel for the Mitochondria Summit. So the Mitochondria Summit was recorded in December 2019, or released in 2019, late in 2019. And there's 30 luminaries in the field, but I was the one that Dr. Jay Davidson asked to be interviewed about lab testing for the mitochondria. And so I don't talk about protocols to help your mitochondria. I talk about lab testing. I'm a huge lab testing nerd. And if you are struggling with thyroid, I strongly encourage you, go watch that video, because you will then understand mitochondria, which is the business end of the thyroid. So we don't have, 53 minutes like that video length is to go over the mitochondria now, but just know that it's there. How to interpret the ion panel from the Mitochondria Summit on my YouTube channel. You can just put in my name, Dr. Sam Shay, into YouTube, and then you'll find it. So that's the first dyad, mitochondria, thyroid. The next one I'm going to go to is iron levels. So in order you need iron for proper thyroid function. And this is why I encourage people who just get thyroid tests, or they're feeling low, get iron tested. People say, oh, if you're feeling low in energy, get your iron tested. Why do you need iron? You need iron for one, so your red blood cells are fully functional. The iron, the hemoglobin, the heme, that's like iron, the core. We have the exact same structure to carry oxygen in our blood. The chlorophyll in plants, they have the same structure as we do, except they have magnesium in the middle, while we have iron as the core. So you need iron to do what? Transport oxygen around for what? To get to the mitochondria to help burn the fuel. You can't burn protein, fats, and carbs without oxygen in the mitochondria. You can't, your thyroid turns, so that's the connect, thyroid, mitochondria, iron, mitochondria. Now you see the connection. You also need iron for the thyroid gland to work properly. Next thing here is adrenals. So the adrenals, as I mentioned before, that's the stress response survival system, controlling blood sugar, controlling inflammation, stress resilience, all the rest of it. The adrenals are considered antagonistic to the mitochondria, but that's a really simplistic view to call them antagonistic. They work in a balance, like a yin yang. The adrenals are there for short-term survival. Your long-term health, healing, growth, repair, reproduction is irrelevant if you're being chased down by a tiger. Just irrelevant. So the adrenals are there to be turned on quickly, fiercely, intensely, and to be done. So your system, you're supposed to be able to sprint for a minute to get away from the danger. And then the danger is supposed to be over. So back as hunter-gatherers, we were either sprinting after things for food or sprinting away from things from becoming food. And then the stress would stop. Today, we've got way more chronic stressors with, the news, deadlines, the fact that we're currently living in, a plague. Things are stressful all around, and the speed of information. We get more information in a week it's actually, I think it's less than a week now. We get more information on what's happening around the world and locally than what our ancestors did in an entire lifetime. So I think it's actually less than a week now, given the speed of information. So the adrenals will shut down the thyroid. So if people are having signs of low thyroid, it's possible that it's actually the adrenals that are overactive. Now, if the adrenals are so overactive for so long that they burn out, then you've got a reverse problem. The adrenals burn out and then they can't sustain themselves. Then your thyroid goes into hyperthyroidism to counterbalance the loss of energy production from the adrenals. So you can go into hypo and then later go into hyperthyroidism with adrenal burning out. Next thing is gut. So with the gut, here's how autoimmunity to the thyroid connects to the gut. Well, so here's a couple connections from the gut to the thyroid. Number one, your gut absorbs nutrition. So if you're not absorbing vitamin A, zinc, selenium, iodine, tyrosine, arginine, any of the other constituents that go into the production, maintenance, delivery, sustainability, and detox of thyroid or the thyroid gland, all those nutrients come in through the gut. So if you have poor digestion, it's going to affect your thyroid through that mechanism. The other mechanism that the gut affects the thyroid is if you get what's called a permeable gut or quote unquote leaky gut, which then what it means is that the gut is a complicated tube with a filter on the inside. The filter is there to keep bacteria, toxins, fecal matter out of the bloodstream while letting pass into the bloodstream proteins, amino acids, fatty acids, carbohydrates, minerals, vitamins, nutrients, water. That's what the gut is supposed to be filtering, keeping the bad stuff out and the good stuff passing in through the bloodstream. Problem is that if your filter has holes or breaks in it, then bacteria, their byproducts, toxins, undigested food will leak across and go into the bloodstream directly. And these jumbled proteins, the body interprets them as foreign invaders, and your body mounts an immune response and lets loose what are called antibodies, which are not heat-seeking missiles, but shape-seeking missiles. And so these shape-seeking missiles attack these foreign-looking proteins in the bloodstream. So, and the problem is that some of these shape-seeking missiles see naturally occurring proteins in the body and think that they're foreign invaders. So it's like a gang war, like Bloods versus Crips. So if you're wearing blue when you walk into a red territory, even if you're not a Crip, you're going to get shot because you're wearing the wrong color. So that's the same thing with if you're a particular protein that leaked through the gut and the immune system sees it, and it just so happens that there's a particular protein in the thyroid that looks exactly like that. That protein, the thyroid, is also going to get shot. So there are 4 main things in the literature that have been shown to trigger autoimmune reactions to the thyroid. 4 main things. Number 1 is gluten. Gluten. I'll say it again. Gluten. Gluten can cross-react, can create an immune cross-reaction to the thyroid. The other 3 are different types of infections: E. coli, Yersinia, a genus of Yersinia, and Blastocystis hominis. Now, you don't need to be on a first name basis with those guys. I do, because that's my job. But what I'm saying is that if your gut is leaky, then gluten and these infections can get across, create an immune response, attack the thyroid. So what's the solution? You identify what's causing the leaky gut. You then heal and seal and soothe the gut to then stop the immune cross reaction that's attacking the thyroid. So that's the gut thyroid connection. The last connection is estrogen thyroid. So estrogen can suppress thyroid function. This is why the vast majority of thyroid cases are women. Vast majority, because there's more estrogen there. There are thyroid issues in men. It's just less common simply due to the differences in hormones. So those are the 5. Diets. Now, how do we deal with estrogen? Well, there's testing for estrogen. You can do specific types of functional tests to check for the 7 types of estrogen and to see also what are the main sources of external estrogens. I've identified 7 external sources of estrogen that people can be exposed to. Things like heated plastics, certain hormones that are injected into inorganic meats, soy products, makeups, especially anti-wrinkle creams, certain pesticides on vegetables, etc. So how do we identify these 5 diets? If you're struggling with mitochondria, so if you're struggling with thyroid or thyroid-like issues, whether you think it's hyper or hypo, how do we figure out what's what? This is where functional testing comes in. There are advanced tests for mitochondria. You can watch my video on it. Like I said, I was the only one of these 30 people that actually talked about how to test the mitochondria. Everyone else was pretty much selling, whatever their product or protocol was, which is great. Those are all wonderful. But my stance is, let's get testing first. Then we can know exactly what to do for you. You can get iron checked. The fact there's an add-on to the mitochondria test that just checks for iron amongst a bunch of other things. You can check for adrenals. Adrenals are simple salivary tests. It's not a blood test. I have a 3.5-minute video on my YouTube channel on why blood tests for adrenals are totally useless unless you're trying to find the far extremes of Cushing's and Addison's disease, where the adrenals have become pathologically damaged. You want the 6-spot salivary test for adrenals to check how your adrenals are doing. Amazing gut tests are out there. There's 4 main gut tests now in the functional medicine world. When I teach other practitioners about how to assess gut testing, I go over those different 4 tests. I have one in particular I really like to screen with first, particularly if someone's got a thyroid issue. And then estrogen, I already mentioned, you can do testing for that. And you can also test for the thyroid. Now, let's talk about testing for the thyroid a bit, that there are, it's not just about TSH. The best things to test for at a minimum are TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, antibodies to thyroglobulin, and antibodies to thyroid peroxidase. So those are typically shorthanded as anti-TG antibodies, anti-thyroglobulin, TG, or anti-TPO antibodies, TPO, thyroid peroxidase. So that's what you may see on labs: anti-TPO, anti-TG, TSH, FT3 for free T3, FT4 for free T4, and RT3 for reverse T3. Those are the 6 metabolites at a minimum you really want to check if you have a meaningful signs of hyperthyroidism. So is it possible to fix thyroid? The answer is yes, and I've shown that on pre and post lab testing. And I just want to talk about some of the factors that negatively affect thyroid: stress, trauma, low calorie diet, inflammation, toxins, infections, radiation, fluoride, because fluoride competes with iodine in the thyroid for the thyroid hormone, liver, kidney dysfunction, certain medications, autoimmune disease, and things that positively affect the thyroid: stress, movement, whole foods, emotional healing, knowing the root of the problem, minerals and nutrients, like all the things we mentioned before. Now, how do we deal with the stressors that affect the thyroid? There's lots of them. I've created a system called the 10 Pillars of Health. And this is the root of those 10 pillars, where the physical is divided into 3 more pillars, and mental emotions to 3 more, biochemical to 3 more. But just in general, this slide is conveying that there's a lot of stressors that we have to address, and that's a critical part of addressing any thyroid concerns you may have. Now, even though thyroid itself the thyroid issues on its own are concerning, if left unaddressed, they can lead to much worse problems down the line. So if you are concerned about thyroid, it's worth dealing with now, because getting worse is not fun. Now, even with the knowledge that we have, a lot of people like myself, I've done all of these things where I've struggled with my health issues over the past decades. And, I've been in places where I was unclear to start, spent too much time on Dr. Google. I think I've had a truckload worth of supplements at this point in my life until I found, really, when I found functional testing, I stopped taking supplements that sounded good based on a podcast, radio show, television show, or newspaper, magazine, or what a friend said. It's based on testing now, so I know exactly what I need. People can just feel overwhelmed, and there's all this contradictory advice, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's people just want the answer to the thyroid. And so this is where the 10-pillar method and functional testing comes in. So the 10-pillar method is my comprehensive health assessment system that I put together to identify what are the root causes that are affecting, for the context of this talk, your thyroid. So the 10 pillars are, it's a system I came up with working with severely unwell clients, really unwell. And I found that the same assessment is beneficial for anyone, no matter what their stage of health, whether they're aspirational biohackers or they're just kind of middle-aged and just don't want to go backwards, or people are struggling with something chronic, because everyone has the exact same 10 facets that affect their health: their hormone system, their bowel and digestion as a second pillar. Third pillar is the brain, is the body, old injuries and genetics. Why is genetics in with the physical body? Because of twins, identical twins are identical because they share the same physical body, because they share the same genetics. Fourth pillar is exercise and movement. Fifth pillar is toxic exposure. Sixth pillar is nutrition and nutrients. Seventh pillar is routines and habits. Eighth pillar is stressors. Ninth pillar is hidden infections. 10 pillars is sleep. So that's the 10 pillar method. And I have a system that I put together where we go through each of those 10 pillars in great detail to identify what you need to do in order to start getting and feeling better right away. And additionally, it identifies what functional tests you may need. So for example, like based on your situation, do you need a mitochondria adrenal test and the gut test? Do you need more than that? Do you need something else? So not everyone needs all the same tests. We customize the tests accordingly. So that's the 10 pillar method. Now, if people were wanting, where do I start? First thing to look at, if you're concerned about your thyroid, is checking the physical structure of your body. Do you have any injuries do you have any really poor posture that's affecting the innervation to the thyroid? Because your thyroid is also controlled by the nervous system. Also, have anyone taken any injuries to the throat? Because that can also really meaningfully affect the thyroid. Brain, so that's the hormone system. So the hormone system is actually controlled upstairs in the pituitary and the hypothalamus. So there's looking at brain balance is real important for mitochondria, nutritional support, and then bowel, as we talked about before. Now, if I were to put another one in, I would add in toxic exposure, because the toxic exposure really can affect the thyroid. So the truth is that I can give you data, stories, science, but they're still not your results. And this is where, I recommend testing for yourself, first doing the 10 pillar method. So I have a solution for people who want to get started, and I want to give you the quickest win possible, and that's to do the 10 pillar method call. So the 10 pillar method call, what it is that it's, you fill out a detailed, secure, HIPAA secured online survey that goes through each of the 10 pillars. So there's about 20, 30 questions per pillar. It's a very involved survey. I'm not going to lie. It's me putting together all the questions from the clients that have, everything that's, how do I put this? Each question on that survey was a meaningful case study of someone in my practice where that question was the linchpin to figure out what was going on with them. So there's, for example, I've got in the bugs and hidden infections, there's a huge number of questions on mold. Not everyone's affected by mold, but for those that are affected, oh my God, are they affected? So you'll see a question on there like, have you checked behind your picture frames for mold? You'll be like, what? That's weird. It's like, well, it may be weird for you, particularly because 99% of people don't have that issue, but I ask you to check anyway. But I put it on there because after the second Wellington earthquake back in, I believe, 2013 or 12, one of my clients who was struggling with profound fatigue, helped him drop a lot of weight from his genetics testing and all the rest of it. He was still really profoundly fatigued, and everything sounded like mold poisoning. And I told him multiple times, this sounds like mold poisoning. Have you checked? And he checked his whole apartment, dry as a bone, no mold, nothing. The second earthquake in Wellington hit. That's when he decided to take the picture that was hanging over his bed off, just in case it fell off at night and crushed his skull. And guess what he found? Totally infested behind his picture frame. Tons of mold, tons of it. So now there's a question in the survey. Is there mold behind your picture frame? Because I didn't learn that in school. That was just through clinical practice. So the questions that are in the 10 pillar method survey are like that. Very, very detailed in order to find out what you need, what is going on, and what you can do right away. So that's a 10 pillar call. It's also what it enables me to do is to customize what pillar we assess, what pillar we work on first. Because not all pillars are created equal, but not all pillars are equal for everybody. So for some person, their priority is to deal with their digestion first. That's pillar number 2. For other person's pillar number 10, it's their sleep. Like their sleep is so out of whack that's the pillar we focus on. And this is where it's really customized, bespoke care, because you now know exactly what lifestyle things you need to do now specific to your situation first. So the call includes 60 minutes. It's actually, I've upped it to 75 minutes of one-on-one dedicated support, walk through all the pillars, in-depth analysis, personalized recommendations for functional testing, detailed follow-up email, and all the lifestyle recommendations accordingly. Now, this 10-pillar method call is an investment for mental, physical, emotional health, as well as your family's health. Now, I really have a special appreciation for helping moms, because in general, when you help mom, you help the whole family. I was raised by a single mom. Dad was absent except for child support and visiting him every other weekend or so. But if my mother's health was way better, the whole family, especially my family, my health would have been much, much better. So investing, and also the demographic typically of people that have the highest concentration of hormone issues are middle-aged women. And middle-aged women are have a understandable kind of cultural stereotype of being overgivers, particularly if they're moms. And this is an invitation to consider for you to invest in yourself, to invest in your family. So if you're very family focused and you don't put your needs first, I would urge you to put your health needs up much higher, because it has a dramatic effect on the family. I know this firsthand because of my mother's not focusing on her health and how it affected the rest of us. So I just talked about this. All right. So the investment is $497 for the 10-pillar method call. And again, it involves my time to review all the survey questions, which I review ahead of time, ahead of the 75-minute call, the time on the call, and the detailed follow-up email support. And it includes all the recommendations of what pillars to work on first and next, and then the lab recommendations. So option one, there's a link that's going to be put into the chat section. The other is that you can book a call at drsamshay.com/shop. That's where you'll see the $497 button there to purchase a 10-pillar method call. You'll come to this screen and you'll see you can pay with credit card, PayPal, etc. And this is the screen that you'll see. And you will receive an email with intake forms and a scheduling link. It's pretty straightforward and streamlined. And for those of you that still have some questions, you can book a health strategy call. Just go to drsamshay.com/health-strategy. That's health-strategy to book a free health strategy call if you have any further questions that you need answered before booking your 10-pillar call. So I designed the health strategy call to be efficient and effective and clarifying about your needs so that we can support your thyroid. Now, for those of you that have stayed until now, if you have a question or a comment, please post it in the chat, and then Crystal will randomly select someone to receive my Reclaim Your Energy and Mystery Fatigue course. Now, this course is relevant to the thyroid because it places a large emphasis on the adrenal gland, but also it covers a lot on the 10 pillars as well. So if you have a question or a comment, either will be accepted as part of the draw. So if you have questions, please post them in the chat. Again, you can book your 10-pillar method call right away at drsamshay.com/shop, or you can go to the contact page to book a free health strategy call. So reminder, your weight imbalance, insomnia, hair loss are signs to look deeper into your inner world. You don't just tolerate it. 10-pillar method call is there to help you. Please book your call today. And thank you all for coming. Please, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. If you have personal questions related to your specific situation, that then please book a health strategy call, or you just jump on the 10-pillar method call. So any questions?
This is Crystal jumping back in. If anyone, you're welcome to pop on camera to talk directly with Dr. Sam. If you have any questions related specifically to the webinar, things that you heard, still have questions about. Suli said it was very informative. Thank you so much for that feedback. If there's anything Dr. Sam is amazing at, is helping connect the dots in these very kind of like mysterious internal processes. So this is a beautiful opportunity to speak directly with him if you'd like. Feel free to unmute yourself.
So I see a question, can hypothyroidism be hereditary? Every biological concern has a hereditary component. There's and not all things are as hereditary as others. I have someone I'm working with right now where every single female in her mother's side of the family has a thyroid issue. Every single one, going back 3 generations, not the males. So is there a hereditary component? Absolutely. Now, how can it be hereditary? I have a bunch of talks on genes on my YouTube channel as well, but some people have more vulnerabilities in certain areas of their bodies relative to others. Thyroid is absolutely can be one of them. Now, it doesn't mean that because it's hereditary, that means it's hopeless. I just want to make that clear. That doesn't mean that it's hopeless. It means that you have to work a little bit harder in order to maintain a healthier thyroid. So I have hereditary issues, like lots of them. Like to date, I have the worst genetics in terms of sheer numbers of variants in my health-related genes than any client I've ever run genetics on to date, which explained why I was so unhealthy growing up while everyone else was seemingly so much better, even though we were in the same environment. And that's because my genetics were very unfortunate in their role, which is why I got so heavily involved in natural medicine, because I had to learn how to keep myself alive. So the heroics that I do just to stay baseline, if people did, this sounds like a humble brag, but it's not. If people did half the heroics that I did just to say that I need to stay baseline, they'd feel superhuman. So, so I have a very, very small playing field in terms of my genetics, and I have to be very vigilant about my lifestyle accordingly. Any other questions? Is there a connection between celiac and hypothyroidism? Yes. So we talked about the gut and gluten. So if you have celiac, you've got a leaky gut, which means that you are prone to, one, having poor absorption of nutrients because you can't finish your absorption, because a lot of the amino acid digestion happens in the cells of the lining the intestines. So you're not actually getting enough amino acids, because even though it's like, well, I'm absorbing all of them through the leaky gut. No, you're absorbing di and tripeptides, which the body can't use. They have to be broken down into individual amino acids. That happens in the cells that line the filter of the colon. So you may develop hypothyroidism from nutritional deficiency, but you can also develop hypothyroidism through autoimmune disorder because of the leaky gut caused by the celiac disease. Are you seeing hypo symptoms increase since COVID hit? Mine has increased even though, okay. So literally everyone's chronic issue since COVID has gone up, whether or not they've gotten the virus, because the level of ambient stress in the world has gone up a wee bit, just a smidge, just a little bit. So yeah, it's everything is worse. Just everything is worse. And you can just draw a straight line back to elevated levels of stress. There's plenty more, but that's enough. That's enough.
Yeah, there can be such a dismissal of the effects of stress in our modern society.
Absolutely.
But it's such an exacerbator.
You're going to see a pandemic of psychological disease in the next 10 years. Like this is particularly from young children. Like the amount of adolescent and teenage psychological issues that we're going to see over the next 10 years is going to be catastrophic. Anyway, I don't need to go into that. We've got 1 minute left. Any other questions?
These are all really great questions. Thank you, everybody. And thank you so much for being here today. Your interaction just means the world to us as a team.
Why is gluten an issue? Excellent question. So two reasons. One, gluten helps tear apart the intestines to make it leaky. That's number one. It breaks up the zonulin and what's called the tight junctions that keep those cells that are the filters that line the intestines closely together to prevent stuff from leaking through. Vitamin D is one of the most important things that keeps those cells tightly knit together to prevent the gut from becoming leaky. So gluten will poke holes in the gut. Additionally, gluten itself is the immune aggravator to the human immune system to create the antibodies that attack the gluten, which also are similar in shape to certain tissues of the thyroid. Do you include grains in your boils? Minimum the gluten-free, the gluten-based grains. So the way to know what what grains have gluten, what grains have gluten, not grains have gluten. I am gluten. Haha. Anyway, browse, BROWS, barley, rye, oats, wheat, spelt. Those are the grains that have gluten. Oats are a special case. They don't have gluten, but they are contaminated with gluten because rye and spelt look utterly identical to wheat grains, and they're processed in the same factory. So there can be contamination of rye and spelt being mixed in with the gluten, with the oat grains. So we're finishing up. If you have what role does salt play in hypothyroidism? So if you don't have enough iodine, you're going to have hypothyroidism. So if you're not taking enough salt, or if you're not taking enough iodized salt, you're going to have potential risk of hypothyroidism.
So if anyone has any further questions, just know that the 10-pillar method call is such a dedicated, beautiful time to sew all of the different connections and questions together. Sam is a wizard at bringing it all together. So be sure to book your 10-pillar method call. I put the link right there. And if you still have questions, feel free to book a health strategy call. It's also a quick and easy way to spend some time with Dr. Sam. Thank you again so much for being here. We're very grateful. We'll be sending out a recording later today. And we hope that you'll join us for the next one too. We have them about monthly. So keep an eye out in our weekly newsletter. We'll be announcing it there.
And the next one will be on genetics. And so you'll be seeing lots of genetics. The next newsletters will all be devoted to genetics. In fact, what is related to this, I just did an interview with Dr. Christina Fortuna, and we spent an hour just on the genetics of food triggers like intolerances and allergens. And celiac is on that genetics profile, your genetic risk for celiac, which was relevant to the discussion we just had. So that's just one of the 7 food triggers discussed on that genetic profile. So look for that in your newsletter. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Crystal, for being a great host, rather. I thought we're still figuring out the co-host host thing. So she's in charge right now. So just
worked out great.
It worked out wonderfully.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.